Autoweb. Welcome to the Millionaire Car Salesman podcast, the #1 resource for automotive sales professionals, managers, and owners to learn how to make money, accumulate wealth, and to all out ball out in the auto industry. And now your hosts, Sean V. Bradley and L.A. Williams.
And we're sponsored by
Auto
Credit Express.
Yes.
Auto Credit Express.
Yes.
Auto Credit Express.
Hey everybody, this is Sean V. Bradley, President of Dealer Synergy and the creator of the Millionaire Car Salesman Group. And I got a really special guest today, my man, Tom Kline. Tom, say hello to everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay, so Tom, we go way back. When people say way back, we go way back, man. How long has it been, or what year did we meet and do business, brother?
I think it was about 20 years ago, Sean. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, it's been pretty significant. I've had my company about 17 years, so it's probably about 17 years ago.
Probably
I think
about
that
17 years now.
You were RK Chevrolet, and this is a funny story, audience, because there's two RKs. One in Vineland, New Jersey, who's a Dealer Synergy client, and another one that's in Virginia Beach. And so, Tom, it's probably about 17 years ago, man. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's a while. It's certainly a while.
And so tell us a little bit about your background. I want to know a little bit about your automotive background, and then let's lead into, the RK Chevy Subaru in Virginia Beach.
Sure. Thanks. I'm glad to be here. My family's been in the car business, Sean, since 1925. My grandfather was in the car business, and I have an ashtray on my desk that shows, remember what an ashtray is when they used to put those out and
Yes.
put those in showrooms? It says courtesy and fairness since 1925. And so he was a Chevrolet dealer here in Norfolk, Virginia. My uncle and my father worked for him for a period of time. And then an opportunity came up in what was then Princess Anne County in 1964. And my father bought that dealership, and that became RK Chevrolet in 1965. And as the area grew, he became competitors with his father, because Princess Anne County became Virginia Beach. And Virginia Beach is now the largest city in Virginia, actually. So I've literally got the car business in my DNA.
That's amazing. Okay, so tell me about the positions that you held, through your career in the car dealership.
Yeah, I've done just about every job there is, Sean. I started out on the floor. I worked in the service department. I did door-to-door parts sales for a couple of years. I worked in the body shop briefly, the service lane, and then I went into the office. The collection manager got fired one day for doing not nice things, and I was anointed the collection manager, and I went into the office and was then responsible for 6 people and an in-house lawyer.
Oh, wow. And you're obviously you were an owner in this dealership, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you're owning the dealership, but your official title was?
Controller.
Okay,
I was the controller.
Now for some of our youngins out there, obviously the control is the person in the back that controls the money, but can you explain what actually define a controller and what the job description is or should be?
Sure. So the way that my title was controller is probably not traditional, because I was handling the collections. At times I had handled the advertising. There was a whole variety of things. I had some bookkeeping responsibilities, and usually a controller in a small dealership handles all the money and all the bookkeeping. And I did do some of the money and was responsible for some GL portions of the business. But as time went on, I had a particular interest in the legal part of the business and the compliance part of the business. And so my role grew in really 3 areas, which is insurance, handling the legal. At that time, it was both us taking care of people who owed us money, as well as people who said that we owed them money, and the insurance and the insurance policies. So it was really those 3 different areas.
Okay, so let's go back to the car sales. Just out of curiosity, when you sold cars, how many cars did you average, or what was your top month that you sold cars? Just out of curious.
I was not a great salesman, Sean. I think
it's okay.
I think my top month was probably 13 cars, something like that.
Okay. Well, no, and I love that, because not everybody sells 80 cars a month or 20 cars a month or whatever it is. And so there's a book called From Jim Collins, From Good to Great. Have you ever read that book?
I have not.
It's a great book, and what he talks about is you have to have the right people on the bus. The bus meaning obviously the dealership, but they have to be in the right seat. And so I kind of set you up with that question because I'm glad because we interview a ton of people on here that sell 20, 30, 40, 50 zillion cars a month, but there's other people that are listening to this podcast that might hate car sales, but they love the automotive industry. And so I think that it's important for you not to get burnt out from car sales. It might not be your perfect fit, but there's so many different things in a dealership. And it sounds like to me, what I heard you just say is that you found, a passion in the compliancy, the legal side as the controller. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. It's like pieces of a puzzle that you get to move around and try to make them fit properly.
Okay, and before to be transparent to the audience, before we got on, we just had a slight conversation, and something came up about accumulated wealth. It's one thing to be able to make money, but you'd have to, Tom, agree that there's a lot of people in other industries, whether they're musicians, they're professional athletes, or hell, even they hit the lottery that get a lot of money, but then they're bankrupt or they go broke, or they're selling their likeness on Kentucky Fried Chicken commercials because they're desperate to turn around and make the alimony payments or whatever the hell it is.
Right.
So you said that you are all about the keeping the money. So can you explain how that works in a dealership?
Sure, be glad to. So I think it's a really important topic that really doesn't get enough air. First of all, how you protect the dealership and how you protect the dealer. That's done through insurance often. Number one, it's done through the various policies that you can talk about. And I'll tell you an anecdotal story in a second about that. The second is what risk and which policies and procedures you put in place to make sure that you don't have a problem. Like, as a dealer, do you have an open door policy so that employees can come in and talk about whatever it is that's bothering them so that they don't end up going to get a lawyer, or they don't go to the attorney general, or they don't go to any other regulator, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Trade Commission. I mean, the list is lengthy. And how you handle those disputes is important. And I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit too. I was, as an example of what you need to think about, I was at a dealership out in the western part of the state and saw that he had 4 huge oil drums that were unprotected. There was no wall around them. There were no bollards around them. And I asked him, and I said, what happens, and it was near the service department, of course, because that's where the used and the new oil is, right? So I said, what happens if the car loses its brakes, right? People bring their cars in for brakes, and what happens if the car doesn't have any brakes and knocks into it? Do you have a pollution policy to protect you? Because I explained to this particular dealer that without a pollution policy, he was personally liable for those things. That's how the law works in terms of oil spills, that he's personally liable. And he said, well, if something happened, I just turn the keys over to the dealership. I said, no, that's not the right answer. Let's talk about that. Let's put a solution in place so you're not thinking that way. And so what I do is, I work on whatever keeps the dealer awake at night. And those are the things where the money goes out the back door, even though a lot of money could be coming in the front door.
Right, and I want to cue on that right here is that a lot of times on the Millionaire Car Salesman podcast, we talk about what it takes to make money. Today's episode is a little bit different, people. Season 3.5. What we want to be able to do is how to keep that money. So before we get into the specifics, I would like you to, what are the most common traps that dealers might or might not know about from your expertise? Tom, what are things that are leaving dealers vulnerable out there? Can you rattle off 5 or 10 things that dealers are at risk at from lawsuits or from losing money?
Absolutely.
Not until we hear from this sponsor.
Attention auto dealers. You need an opportunity to do business to do business. Autoweb is one of the largest suppliers of high quality leads. I mean, high quality buyers. At a 10% closing ratio, you will be at less than $190 per car sold. Don't just settle for what you get. Autoweb can fully customize your results through targeted markets and or zip codes. And as a partner, you will get premium placement within search results. Who better to do that than literally the people that invented automotive internet sales? If you want to sell more cars more often and more profitably, then you need Autoweb.
Okay, Tom, go.
So number one, I'd say, is not having a good system to respond to internet complaints. Internet complaints can become lawsuits very quickly if they're not managed correctly. So best practices are, if you get it in, you should monitor that every single day. You should go on, look at the big website, Google, Facebook, Dealer, Pissed Consumer. These are all ones that you should go on a daily basis. Customers have posted that they had a bad experience. Somebody from the dealership should reach out to them immediately. First of all, sometimes it's to figure out who they are because they don't always use their real name on the posting. So figure out who they are, reach out to the customer, and satisfy them. That's really important because oftentimes what happens is two or more customers who are disgruntled talking about how much they don't like the dealership, and that turns into a problem. One example of that is, I know a class action lawsuit that started in church. Two ladies were sitting next to each other in church, and one said, "Did you get screwed by that dealer?" "I did too." Sue them, and they filed a class action. Costs, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So number one is.
Wait a minute, let me build on that, because I have some expertise as an internet trainer here for online reputation. So if I'm hearing you correctly, online reputation, if it's not managed correctly, could lead into massive lawsuits, even a class action lawsuit that of a dealership. What state was that lawsuit in, just out of curiosity?
It was in Virginia.
It was in Virginia. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But I want to cue the audience up with certain things on here, is that there's a certain way to respond to these people, because Google's algorithms, this is now a technology like Goober thing real quick here, are looking for negative keywords. Okay, so let's say somebody blasts you online. If you actually respond and say, "I'm sorry for your bad experience," Google's actually taking those negative keywords, and they are, in their algorithm, they're going to be able to, put you in a certain type of a category. So the way that you have to respond to somebody, so here's just a little quick pro tip. If somebody says that they had a horrible experience at your dealership and you screwed me and blah, 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 instead of saying something like, "I'm sorry you had a bad experience at my dealership," which sounds benign, it sounds professional, it sounds that you're trying to be, nice and respect somebody's opinion. However, you're burying yourself in Google. What you might want to turn in and say is, to the customer, "Here at ABC Motors, we strive for 100% client satisfaction. I'd love to be able to set up a time where you can either come into the dealership, meet me so we can discuss this, or if it's okay, if you could please give me a call. Here's my personal phone number. I'd love to be able to create a win-win scenario or positive resolution to this matter." Something like that. Using positive connotations in the verbiage online is really important, because people need to understand that these search engines are crawling these keywords that are being typed in, and they are putting them in a certain type of category. Does that make sense, Tom?
Absolutely. And even more important than posting something, because it is important to post, you really just need to reach out to the customer by telephone, try to get them in, and as you said, just try to satisfy their concerns.
Yes. Now, I do have some questions in here. I wasn't prepared that you were going to bring this up, but I love this, because I've been a victim of cyber terrorists my damn self, and I've learned something here. So let's talk about this. First thing that you said that I commend you on is dealers need to be extremely vigilant. I'm using my words, but I'm translating what I heard from them. They need to be vigilant. And too many times, Tom, what I find is that they rely on the OEMs, no disrespect, but the OEMs BS suggestions of vendors for online reputation, which they have bots and they do this and they do that. My pro tip right here is Tom's right. If you are a dealer principal, a general manager, or an executive manager, or hell, even as an individual automotive sales professional, you need to be vigilant on your keywords. So you could actually set up Google alerts on your keywords or key phrases for your name. Anytime somebody says anything positive or negative, you should be notified that something hit the internet, so you are vigilant. So besides the Google alerts and being aware of what's being posted, you need to have a standard operating procedure, for once any type of thing is posted, positive or negative, what's your response? However, Tom, I want to talk about, you mentioned pissed off customer. Folks, there are sites that I've dubbed parasites. Wink, wink, you get it? Because they're parasites. See, Google and Yelp and these companies, they're authenticated, meaning people can't just post random stuff or use a fake name, because you could get that removed. But there are sites that are parasites, that are shitty sites out there, like Pissed Off Consumer, Complaints Board, and things like that. I'm not saying a Better Business Bureau, that's a good site, but Pissed Off Consumer and Complaints Board, these are sites that are not regulated. And what that means is anybody could go on there and post anything. And Tom, here's my question to you. There's a big question here. As an SEO expert, I don't have your expertise for compliance and for controlling and stuff like that, but as an SEO expert, I was always taught not to turn on and engage those type of sites, okay? The parasites, because what you're doing is every time you click or you go back and try to read something, you're giving SEO juice to the search engines, which is going to push it higher in the search engines. My philosophy is those sites that are not Google or Yelp or the authenticated sites, I just try to ignore them, even though it rips me apart inside, because they could say heinous things, because there's no way that you could win. Somebody said a long time is that, you don't want to, have a fight with a pig because, again, in a mud, because a pig, loves it or whatever, that I butchered that analogy, you know what I mean? But again, you can't win that battle. What's your opinion on that? Do you advise to even respond positively on one of those sites? Because it's going to just keep bringing that up on the searches.
I think that it's important to figure out whether the comment is from a real customer or not. And that's pretty easy to do if you have somebody who will do a little Sherlock Holmes work and figure out if the customer's real. My opinion is if the customer's real, you have to address it. If you determine that the customer's real, or it's a different dealership and they just confused the name, which happens all the time, or it's one of your competitors, then I think you don't give air to it. But I think if it's a real customer, I think it's important to address it.
I love that. So I would concur. So what you want to try to do is you want to just try to totally ignore it. You want to be able to try to, do some detective work and try to figure out, who it is, especially the timing, because you can tell what was said in there. If somebody's like, Sean Bradley sucks or Tom Kline sucks, I hate him, I hope he dies, then, it might be hard. It might be somebody that's a hater. But if somebody says, they use a fake name, but they say, I came in, and they kind of describe like a eerily similar situation that just happened at the dealership. That's right. It. So would you say that one of the things is that if you have somebody that's vigilant, that's paying attention to all these sites, the authenticated good sites for online reputation, as well as these parasites, and that once they find something that they might want to have some type of a mechanism, like whether it's some dealerships have like groups, like Google, chat groups, or they have Facebook groups internally. They say, hey folks, we just got this negative review. Does anybody recognize this scenario? Do you have any tips like that of what you could do to try to get some detective work on?
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot easier than that, because usually from the review you can tell if it's a new car or a used car, right? So if it's a new car, you call the new car manager and say, here's the scenario. Does this sound familiar to you? And 9 times out of 10, the manager says, yes, that's Mrs. McGillicuddy, and here's what happened. And they'll tell you right off the top. Or if it's a used car, you call the used car manager. So it's generally fairly easy to track down. The service manager for service complaints, right? Whatever that it is. And then you can get the facts, and then you can it's important, I think, to deal with the facts of the situation, which is kind of one of my things, is you always have to get down to the facts. Eventually, the facts have to come out.
No, I like this. So that handles the one scenario, though. The one scenario is if it's a real customer, okay? And so we need to address it, and we need to cut it off at its head, because it could blow up into a lawsuit. And everybody at this point should know that anybody can file a lawsuit, frivolous or not. And almost always it's going to be more money once it gets to the lawsuit level to even just settle. I mean, you got to put your freaking ego to the side and try to avoid litigation or lawsuit at any cost if possible, because there's no winner on your team side if you have to go to lawsuit. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a really important point.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But tell us after this message.
At the very first Dealer eProcess keynote, Gino Ciparroni and Sam Fukas introduced new tools and strategies to drive conversion, new designs to increase customer engagement, and new technologies to dominate the competition. Visit dealereprocess.com/keynote to watch and see what's new in 2021.
Okay, Tom, what was that point you wanted to bring up?
Which is, everyone wants to say, well, we didn't do anything wrong. You hear that a lot. Well, why should we fix this? We didn't do anything wrong. And the answer is, in the insurance business, there's a notion that the first loss is your best loss. In other words, if you can resolve the problem quickly and on the first try, then it's going to be the least expensive way to resolve it. If you let it go, it's just going to get more and more expensive and take more and more time.
No, absolutely. I got to tell you, I've got clients, I've got personal friends, in and out of automotive industry that have gotten sued for various things, stupid things. And they've sat in front of federal magistrates or federal judges and said, listen, I am almost positive off the record that you're not guilty of this, but I'm trying to help you. It's better that you settle now, because if you go to trial, you might lose trial and be in a world of hell. But even if you successfully won trial, it's going to cost you more than this bullshit settlement right here. And then you got to turn around and also put in, and this is something that I never realized when I was younger and stupid as a hothead. You know what I mean? Is time is money. So, even if you are able to mitigate the financial loss because you're trying to wait it out or whatever, but all the freaking time that you're investigating and you're spending that you could have been spent, you could have utilized building your own business and making money, you're distracted, you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed, you're spending hours, talking to the attorneys or looking for evidence and all this shit distractions. It doesn't help the business. So would you talk about that too? So it's not just about the financial loss that you're trying to prevent, it's the emotional loss and the time loss. Would you concur?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we do dispute resolution, is because it's important to go in. Somebody has to be the finder of fact. And generally the lawyers, whether they're good lawyers or not good lawyers, don't really get into the facts of the matter. And the facts is where the whole case will turn, if it becomes a case, or the whole situation. You've got to get into the facts, and that means interviewing all the people. It means reviewing the paperwork to see what the paperwork says, and there are lots of clues in the paperwork. Was it a recontract situation? Did the customer know they were recontracting? Plaintiff lawyers like to say that bad car dealers do what they call a 5-finger disclosure, where you put your 5 fingers down on the retail installment sales contract so the customer doesn't know what they're signing. Right? And so there's all kinds of these allegations, a yo-yo sale. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term, but plaintiff lawyers like to say that dealers on purpose will put a customer out at a low APR, knowing that the deal can't get done. And then the dealer purposely pulls the customer back in and tries to recontract them at an APR that's twice what they were originally done, and that the customer feels like they have to sign because they don't want to be embarrassed. These are the kind of allegations that happen all the time.
Okay, so now let's, because we'll be on here. This is a topic that's amazing. I didn't even know we were going to go this route. This is great. But you also triggered on 2 other things here: employees. Okay, because again, I've had the situation with an ex-employee that's, who's literally dubbed the village idiot in the automotive industry. Like if you Google the village idiot automotive sales, there goes this person, right? Like literally. And I wasn't the one that did that, by the way. The problem is that a lot of dealerships are not protecting themselves in the beginning. And so I have something that I recommend to all my dealers, but I'd love to run it by you, is that in the employment contract, when you hire somebody, obviously I think that there should be an NDA in place. And I also believe that there should be a mutual non-disparage act that's in there, because sometimes people leave the dealership, and especially with a 70 to 80% attrition ratio, there's a revolving door for most dealerships around the United States. And if somebody's pissed off for whatever reason, they could affect a multi-million or multi-centi-million. Like, some dealerships are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And so just because they're pissed off. So what advice do you have to protect dealers from disgruntled ex-employees? Do you like the non-disparage clause in the contract, or do you have any other ideas as well?
I do have another idea. And I think these employees often go to the EEOC, and the EEOC has a mediation. And I'd encourage the dealers to do that. But the direct answer to your question is, I like something a lot more simple, which they sign an agreement that says if they have a problem, before they litigate, it's called a condition precedent, that before they litigate or go to a lawyer or sue, that they agree to sit down and meet with the dealer, or they agree to sit down and meet with the general manager. It's really very simple. It gives you an opportunity to sit down with the employee and say, okay, if we did something wrong, let us try to fix it. Let's try to work it out instead of getting all the lawyers involved. Very simple, very straightforward. And then if an NDA is called for, then you pay them a little money and have them sign the NDA, and you part on good terms. I always, with kindness, with courtesy, and with respect, I think you treat the employees, and I think for the most part, they'll return that in kind.
Wow, you hit a bunch of great nuggets there. So going through the statement right before that last one, I like that. So I want to be clear. If you have them sign this agreement, that means if they're heated or they're pissed, they can't go to a lawyer. Or if they do, you just show the lawyer the clause. Like, listen, before, like they agreed that before this goes to litigation, and then they're not allowed to go to a lawyer because they agreed that they have to go through this part first. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
So,
very simple.
Perfect. It's like a prenup. You can't change a prenup after the fact. You agreed on it, premarital. So
right. Well, you can always argue about everything, Sean. You know that. But no, it does. Generally, a reasonable lawyer, a good lawyer, will say, okay, absolutely. I want to be there with the employee. Fine. Or let them go and have their meeting, and then if that's not satisfactory, they can come back to me and we can argue about it.
Okay, but man, I got to tell you this. You just said something that I thought was just important, and I know that we're playing defensive here, for dealers and keeping their money. But you said something, man, that I think is just really important to me, and I'm making it a little dramatic on purpose. Is that you've got to treat your people good, because that's the biggest way to alleviate potential lawsuits. If you're a scumbag and you're treating people like shit, there might be ways to save you because you're rich and you could pay for this, you put this clause in there. But what's going to help you not get sued is not being an asshole or taking advantage of people or treating people like shit. Right or wrong?
Absolutely.
However, with that being said, is that if you are being professional, kind, you're being a great leader, great organization, human nature is human nature. There are going to be bad apples in the bunch, and there are going to be people that are going to try to game the system or exploit you or take advantage of you. So, you don't want to turn around and just assume, well, I'm good to my people. They're not going to try to screw me and take me over. You've got to be prepared and protect your investment in your business and your other employees.
And one other way it's important, again, policies and procedures are important, but in that case, you need to make sure you have the right insurance behind you. It's called EPL Insurance, or Employment Practices Liability Insurance. And there are coverages for that, so that if you do have a problem with an employee, you can turn it over to your insurance company, and then how you choose to deal with it from there is up to you. Some dealerships, like I recommend, is you call the insurance company on the phone. You say, hey, I want to sit down with the employee and see if we can get it worked out, or sit down with the employee and their lawyer and see if you can get it worked out. And, will you give me authority to settle it? And if so, how much? And that's a negotiation that goes back and forth between the dealership and the insurance company to try to work out the problem. And then whether the dealership wants to disclose to the employee that they have that kind of insurance is a different choice. And there's a whole different decision tree on whether you want to do that or not, and let the employee know there's insurance or not. But that's an important part of protecting the dealership, is making sure that coverage is in place.
So again, that's called EPL, Employment Process, you said?
Practices. Employment practices liability.
Okay, so, and this is crackling again, so give us a second.
Don't be the last one with your hand up at the auction. VinQ Vehicle Buying Center gives dealers the digital and in-store tools you need to buy direct from the public. On average, inventory bought from the public grosses $1,200 higher on the front end alone. VinQ turns buying cars direct from the public into a business. The most profitable dealerships in the country are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in additional front end gross. Private party acquisition starts with VinQ. See it at VinQ.com.
Okay, so the EPL is Employment Practices Liability. Okay,
right.
That's phenomenal. Okay, and let's transition and keep this thing moving, because this is so intriguing here. Competitors, haters. So let's just say that a competitor assassinates your character online or does something nefarious. How do you advise to handle that?
Well, I guess there's two ways. That's not something I regularly get into, but I have dealt with it before. And I think there are probably two different ways. Number one, you contact the website itself and say, hey, we've checked, we've gone through our CRM, we know that this is not our customer, and we'd ask that you investigate whoever put it up. And most of the websites have a way of going through that in a way that you can appeal to them and get them to pull down false reviews, because they don't want to be, they're a victim too, right? The dealership's a victim. They're a victim too, because they don't want erroneous information on their website unless they're completely unscrupulous.
And I'm gonna throw in my experience here, but websites like Consumer, I know Complaints Board or Pissed Off Consumer, those people don't give a shit. They make money by trying to, mitigate these things or mediate these things, but they don't care. They don't care whatsoever. Somebody can turn around and say that Tom Kline, grabbed this person or whatever, even though that's not true. They don't care. And so, but that goes to my point before about authenticated sites like Google, Yelp, and DealerRater, these professional sites, you're absolutely right. They want to make sure that the information is correct and people are not just manipulating their platform to their own, diabolical needs. But let's just say that you find out, somehow that this is XYZ Motors. Is that something that a lawyer should, send a cease and desist at? Is it something that suggests that maybe they would look into, like, slander charges or defamation charges or interference of business, because, those type of things?
I think this goes back to your question earlier about a dealer only has so much time to work on so many things. If you're working on this, then you're not selling cars. And unless it's a systemic problem, I would let it go, because it's not helping you. Or if you want to pay somebody to work on it, you can pay somebody to work on these things. But again, I think unless there's multiple reviews on multiple sites and it really is starting to do some damage, I think you let it go for the most part.
Okay, good. All right, perfect. We spent a lot of time on online reputation and the fallout, but I got to tell you, this is legitimately serious stuff. Google says in 2011, Tom, they wrote that ebook, ZMOT, which is the Zero Moment of Truth. And the whole concept is that dealers could invest, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars a year in marketing, advertising, technology, HR, all this stuff, and have somebody excited to want to do business with them. And then they go online. Because people, just like before they go to the restaurant, they're going to check the reviews. If people check a review, they're going to go from point of interest to bam, zero moment of truth within seconds. They're going to say, I don't want to deal with somebody that does business like that. So online reputation is a real thing, and it could really cost dealers, potentially millions of dollars if it's not managed and it is not, done properly. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think to kind of wrap that in a nice bow, Sean, best practices, I think, are after you've satisfied the customer, and it has to be after. You go back to the customer and when you're sitting down with them and say, hey, that review that you wrote, it kind of upsets me, honestly, because that's not who we are and that's not how we try to do things. Would you mind going back and updating your review and letting people know that we're not such bad people after all? I didn't ask them to delete the review. I didn't ask them to get rid of the review. I asked them to update the review. And you're talking about the 0 moment of truth. If a customer, and I think, because I'm a consumer too, right? I go out and buy all kinds of stuff. If I see that a business has made a mistake, but then they came back and they fixed it, all the things that I've ever read my whole life say that makes people want to go back to you even more, because everybody knows that no business is perfect. Nobody pretends to be perfect. But if you make a mistake and you're a business and you make a mistake and then you go correct it, I think that's very attractive to people. So I think that helps you on the 0 moment of truth, assuming someone is diligent enough to read that, first they said they had a problem, the dealership responded, and then they followed up and said, hey, they fixed my problem. I really appreciate their help.
Strong. Tom, this is really important. And this is, again, a very unique interview on the Millionaire Car Salesman podcast. And I think this is so important for dealers and automotive professionals here. Let's go to another thing. And we don't have a ton of time. So I want to try to get a couple more, at least 2 more different topics that you specialize in, or you want to be able to give advice to dealers. So this was a huge one. Give me another big risk that dealers have, or that, that they're wide open on, or they might not even know that they're wide open on.
I think problems always come first on 2 legs, right? So consumers and employees are your first set of problems. But after that is deceptive advertising. Allegations will come from a variety of places. An example is Tate Automotive was just closed down by the Federal Trade Commission. I believe they had 4 stores, and it was for income falsification and deceptive advertising, both. And Bronx Honda is another example. And my recollection on that one is it's the same thing. It was income falsification and false advertising. And there are things that you can do, Sean, that a good company will do, which is come in and audit the deals. And you can actually have somebody like us check your deal jackets and make sure that the F&I managers are doing exactly what they should be doing and not artificially inflating someone's income to get a deal done. And if they're being paid on the variable, then they have incentive to do that. So you need to have checks and balances. That's part of compliance, is checks and balances.
Tom, no, this is really great information. You said something about like the false advertising or the bait and switch, like posting cars. Some of them might be malicious, which is, again, bad, mojo. Or it might be sloppy protocol, meaning that they're leaving vehicles up there, they're not updating the inventory. So again, it's creating standard operating procedures. If I'm understanding correctly, one of the most important things is educating the staff, from the internet department, the showroom sales staff, on exactly what the current programs are, what the national programs are from your OEM, what are the regional programs for the OEM, what are your dealership specific, programs. If you have ad cars, explaining the details of that ad car, because I think part of it is that dealers suck at communication. Sometimes whoever's doing the market advertising, they don't tell people on the front lines that are engaged with these prospects on the phones or on the internet or even in the showroom certain things, and that could lead to the lawsuits or what have you. So I think that just communication is key and clear. Second, developing protocols for example, if it's inventory, how long does a vehicle stay on your inventory before it gets removed if it was sold? Does it stay on there if it's sold but not delivered, if there's only a deposit? There's certain things that need to be articulated. I've got that. And then what you just said is that there's companies like your company, for example, that goes in and audits deals to make sure that everything, is as it should be. And I think that's important because, whether they're increasing income or they're power booking cars cars or they're doing whatever. I mean, again, there's a lot of different ways for money to flow in a car dealership: front end, back end, the trade-in, the vehicle of interest, the financing, the leasing. There's so many different ways. And so you have to regulate it and you have to, manage it. Would you agree?
We'll have Mr. Kline clarify right after this message.
Auto Credit Express is the leader in subprime auto financing. For over 20 years, we have served the online consumer, working to match the best dealers with consumers who need their help securing financing. With more than 250,000 leads per month, Auto Credit Express is the authority for dealers who understand that the special finance deal generates a higher gross profit. We've worked hard to innovate our solutions, bringing you Buyer Assist to drive consumer text engagement, building out robust solutions to help the underserved Spanish-speaking community. We now deliver proof of income on our leads through our proprietary STIPS feature, and are building dealer-branded social media marketing campaigns to help you, the dealers, build your brand. Contact Auto Credit Express today to learn how we can help you own your market for subprime finance. Sell more cars with higher gross profit and partner with Auto Credit Express today. Mention the Millionaire Car Salesman podcast for a special discount today.
Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. It's you manage what you monitor. And if you don't have policies and procedures in place so that if something doesn't get done, then you know who to hold accountable, right? You said I think a lot of dealerships don't remove their inventory until the deal is actually billed, when it physically removes the car from inventory, and then the CRM or the ADP or rentals or whoever you're using will actually remove it from your internet feed, and that's how it goes. So it just depends, and it's important that you know how that happens so that you're satisfied with it. And if you're managing, going back to your online complaints, if people are continuing to complain that they went to the dealership and they couldn't find that car that was advertised, then you need to take that feedback and understand that operationally you need to make a change because you're getting complaints over it. That's the beauty actually of an internet complaint, is if you actually take the feedback to heart, you can improve your business operations as a result.
Strong. Okay, I want to go in because we only have about 4 minutes left. I want to talk about something that's important to internet departments, BDCs, hell, dealerships in general, is the FCC's TCPA guidelines for text messaging. Because what I'm seeing out there, Tom, is still years later, dealers are not getting this the right way. And I know for a fact there's large dealer groups that have had six-figure fines, and even up to seven-figure fines. And because I believe for every infraction, it's $1,500 fine. So if you that's per text that you're doing without opt-in permission. So do you have any information or knowledge or strategy that you would like to advise dealers and automotive professionals about text messaging?
Yeah, I think like you said, you have to. It's important for training. If you train your people on what your policy is and what the law is, then I think you're good. I think, generally, I think people want to do the right thing, but they don't necessarily know what the right thing is. And that's when they step outside their bounds, or they're trying to be overly aggressive. Somebody says, I'm not interested in buying a car. Please stop texting me. And they keep texting. So, I think it also goes back to courteous and, being courteous. But it's important, I think, for all the salespeople, and I'm a big advocate for making sure that once you train, every time you train your salespeople or your managers, have them sign off on that and put that in their personnel file, right? So if you have a problem later, you pull that out and say, hey, we talked about this once. Here's our policy. It's in writing. Please follow it. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. So it's back to training. It's back to communication. And doing these 1, 2, 3 things every day, day after day, is the difference, I think, between being successful and having a lot of problems.
Okay, so Tom, tell us about your company. What's the name of your company that you have now?
It's called Better Vantage Point.
Okay. And what do you guys do? I'm assuming you obviously do compliance and security, you're helping dealers stay, with their money. But give us a breakdown of the different services that you guys offer.
Sure. So it comes in 3 different areas. One is dispute resolution. So if your dealership needs help with one of these disputes and you just want to focus on selling cars, you hire us. Sean, we'll handle the whole lawsuit or the whole dispute from soup to nuts, whether it's a lawsuit or an EEOC complaint or responding to the Federal Trade Commission or any regulators that may inquire. So that's one area, is dispute resolution. The second is compliance. In compliance, we'll do a 1 to 2 day audit and go through and tell you which areas of your business you really need to bone up on. For example, IRS 8300 compliance. That's the drug dealer, and did they pay with more than $10,000? Do you have policies and procedures in place to catch those? Because dealers can be fined up to $1.5 million and 5 years in jail. It's nothing to mess around with. So do you have these kinds of policies and procedures in place? If not, we can act as your part-time compliance officer, but we'll come in, we'll put the policies in place, we'll train with the sign-offs to make sure everyone understands, and then come back and monitor those things going forward. And then on the risk management side, it's what policies can you put in place so that you don't have problems, and making sure that you have the right insurance to back it if you do run into a problem, to have the risk laid off on an insurance company, so that it's not your dollars at risk, it's the insurance companies. So that's kind of the brief. I call it the 3 legs of the stool: dispute resolution, compliance, and risk management.
Awesome. So what's the website and what's the number they can reach you at if they want some of their help? It's
bettervantagepoint.com, and the number is 757-434-7656.
Well, Tom, this has been absolutely fascinating. And again, it's really, really important, here at the Millionaire Car Salesman podcast, that we try to help the automotive industry not only make money, but keep it. All right.
Right on.
All right, cool. So now I'm going to give you an opportunity. If you have a closing statement that you want to leave the audience with, whether it's about any of these 3 things or anything that you would like to say. I mean, I think it's fascinating that your family has, been in the automotive industry for, practically about 100 years almost. And so
Right.
It's pretty amazing. So you have a lot of perspective on so many different levels of the business. What would you like to leave the audience with?
I just want to thank you for having me on the show. I'm glad to, if I can help anyone, have them feel free to call me. I'm pleased to be here, and I've appreciated our friendship, and I thank you for letting me be on the show.
Listen, brother, again, real recognizes real. And I've just been impressed with what you've accomplished. And I think what you bring to the table is unique. I don't see a ton of people running around doing what you do, which is good for you because you have a niche, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's an important niche that dealers need. So thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you, Sean.
So there you have it, the Millionaire Car Salesman podcast. This podcast comes to you every week from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. If you have a question about the show or would like the chance to become a guest, feel free to contact us directly at 856-546-2440 or email us at millionairecarsalesman@gmail.com. This program is a presentation of Synergy Records, produced by Tiana Mick and L.A. Williams. Production and engineering by L.A. Williams. The Millionaire Car Salesman podcast is hosted every week by L.A. Williams and the Millionaire Car Salesman himself, Sean V. Bradley. The Millionaire Car Salesman podcast can be found everywhere, so please don't forget to review, subscribe to, and share the show. Thanks for listening to the Millionaire Car Salesman podcast, and remember, where I'm from, money provides options. The Millionaire Car Salesman podcast is sponsored in part by Internet Brands, Dealer E-Process, VinQ, and Autoweb. If you enjoyed this podcast, then make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave us a review. Let some other folks know about it. Oh, and don't forget to join the Millionaire Car Salesman group on Facebook. We'll see you there.